I don't think you know what American values are. I don't think you know what this country was founded or built upon. And I think you guys are obsessed with a cult leader who is taking the entire Republican Party off of a cliff.
Everything he say he do. Trump is gangster. Remember.
Can you give me one thing you don't like about Trump?
I love everything about
I know,
Trump.
because it's a cult. Thank you.
It's not a cult.
Hey, my name.
Folks, I tried really hard to watch Destiny on Jubilee, one person versus a ton of Trump supporters, and it was tough. It was so tough to watch Destiny because he apparently is a very professional debater, but the way in which he talks over people, he loads them with facts. He has this this monotone way of speaking at a high rate of speed that's very off-putting and jarring when you're trying to actually have a conversation. And to me, that was just, if that's professional debate, I'm so glad I'm not a professional debater. Now, I don't want to go through the entire 2-hour video because it is 2 hours and I would not recommend anyone watch 2 hours of this debate. It was very off-putting to me. But there is one thing that Destiny did say in his video that I want to challenge because I think it's worthwhile discussing, and it's a common claim by those on the left that, Trump is this threat to democracy. So I'm going to play the clip really quickly and then we'll go from there. Go.
Themselves, among a whole bunch of other actions, immediately disqualifying for the office of presidency.
Okay, so Steve, let's talk about January 6th. What happened that day in your mind, and why does that disqualify President Trump?
I think that Donald Trump was unwilling to accept the results of the elections. I think that he fabricated slates of electors in order to have his vice president pick him to be the winner in the Capitol building on January 6th, even though he didn't have the votes or the evidence to support it. I think that is a wholly undemocratic thing. I think that it is destructive and undermines our democratic process of governance.
Okay, so it's a common concern from the left that Donald Trump is saying this is a rigged election. Somehow, by that nature, it's wrong. I actually did a deep dive on the same issue, and I questioned whether or not the president has the right to question the electoral process, questioning the integrity of the electoral process. And Trump made many claims during his time running for office in 2020. And he said the only way he could lose is if the system were somehow rigged. He not only said that Biden was an unworthy adversary, he also pointed to various states having various degrees of voter ID and mail-in ballot. Mail-in ballots heavily favor Democrats. And so for those reasons, Donald Trump was very much questioning the electoral process. Again, from Trump's perspective, it was that Joe Biden isn't a true rival, and these varying ways of calculating the votes were suspect at best. And so he was very concerned about this. However, he stopped short of calling for an overthrow of the government. Had Trump said the election is rigged and therefore I urge people to overthrow the government, Donald Trump would be in violation of U.S. federal law and would then be charged criminally for that act. But it is within the president's right to question and validate the electoral system. Now, you might be asking, where is all this coming from, Christopher? How do I know this? Well, the founding fathers in the United States were specifically putting in place a decentralized system with 3 distinct branches: executive, judicial, legislative. Alexander Hamilton, one of the chief architects, said that the executive branch had to be very powerful because of the bureaucracy. And a powerful executive branch was essential for effective governance. He warned that a president weighed down by the consistent fear of legal accountability would be hesitant, bogged down in indecision, and ultimately unable to protect the nation. And so for Hamilton, the solution was presidential immunity. Executive branch powers were absolutely necessary. The president must have freedom to act decisively without fear of consistent lawsuits and interference. This immunity would extend to questioning the electoral process. If the electoral process appears to be compromised, these are Alexander Hamilton's words, the president has the authority to probe further, expose inefficiencies, and address any potential flaws in the system. This is where Trump's actions get particularly Very, very interesting. Trump's approach, though sometimes aggressive, stayed within the boundary of questioning the electoral process and criticizing the electoral process. He characterized it as flawed. He stopped short of calling for a direct overthrow of the system. Again, saying things like the election was rigged remained within the executive's rights to challenge the perceived issues in governance. This was actually upheld by the Supreme Court. Now, some would argue the Supreme Court is very conservative leaning, et cetera, but regardless, the understanding of the founding fathers and what they were saying in the Federalist Papers was for the president to question electoral results. By the way, it's not Trump, as he's not the first person to actually do this. If you're old enough, if you're old like me, I'm not old, maybe young at heart, but you remember Al Gore and George Bush. There were a lot of concerns about the 2000 general election in the United States, including the Florida recount. I believe in 2016, even some Democrats were concerned about the election results electing Donald Trump. This has been routine across many Democrat and Republican candidates, questioning the electoral process. And again, going back to the Federalist Papers, it is within the rights of the president to do so. Now, again, we can assume that the Supreme Court is conservative and it's, has its partisan leanings, but we have to make sure that we understand presidential immunity. It exists to preserve the executive's efficiency and decisiveness, a principle that was never intended to serve party politics, although many argue it's co-opted to do so. This underscores the right of the president to question electoral results. Now, we can debate about Trump's rhetoric. Trump's rhetoric is indeed sometimes very inflammatory and very extreme. I would actually argue not unlike what we've heard from elements on the left. Now, some on the left would say, well, this is in response to that kind of rhetoric. But we've seen this on the left too, the characterization of Trump supporters here in Canada, what Trudeau characterized Freedom Convoy supporters of, that is consistent across both, it seems, especially on the extremes. And to be honest, in my opinion, just looking at this objectively, I would argue that it's the Democrats and the Republicans allowing those more extremist characterizations to make it to the top of their echelon of their parties that lends itself to this greatly more divided and partisan world. There are ways we can talk to our leaders to not get into the mud like that. Now, what's also interesting is that part of the Federalist Papers too is there was this very major concern about factionalism. And in order to preserve that factionalism, the idea was that there needed to be an electorate, there needed to be delegates. The whole electoral system means that you, as a presidential candidate, you have to go state to state and you have to win over enough voters in that state with what you plan to do for the presidency. And that makes sense, right? So before the party can even elect you as their leader, you would have had to have gone to enough states to win over enough delegates for the party to say, yep, Christopher, he's made his case to enough people, they support him, he's the person to lead this party. And the founding fathers would be very, very skeptical and very, very critical of anyone who bucks that system. In fact, they would probably say that that is not what is in the best interest of democracy. So when we talk about voter integrity, we have to remember that Kamala Harris inherited the delegates that Joe Biden fought for. And that is a major, major concern that Destiny didn't talk about in the hour and a half I was able to watch, but something that I think Democrats and Republicans should talk about. To me, I think there should be a bipartisan bill or some type of rule in place that should the president step down for whatever reason, health, personal, whatever, that there is some type of process in place to preserve the delegate system. That, if the president steps down, let's say 30, 60 days before the election, whatever the case is, that there is some system in place that preserves that delegate system. Because without that, you get a Kamala Harris who inherits delegates. And I think many Democrats even are voting for Kamala because they don't want Trump, not because Kamala is the best person for the job. And I think that is factionalism, perhaps in a clear definition. People are voting for her as a protest vote. And I think the founding fathers would be very, very upset that the democracy has been whittled down to that. That is exactly what they were fighting against in the Federalist Papers. They didn't want factions to overrun the presidency, the executive branch. And if Kamala were to win on Tuesday, the idea of factionalism could actually be institutionalized. What would be the purpose of the electoral system if the delegate system, if in fact it can be overturned should the president step down? And conspiratorial hat here on for a second, if the party doesn't like the president and what the president is doing, could the party, knowing that they don't need to go to the delegate system, could they force the president out, put in the candidate they want a few months before an election? Could that happen? And are we seeing that right now? Anyways, I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. I encourage all of you to just check out Destiny's video, but it was a really hard watch. And let me know what you think about that as well. All right. Take care, everyone.